I'm stating for the record, today's date is June 22nd, 2016, at VFW Post 6393. I'm interviewing Russell Davidson. Mr. Davidson's date of birth is November 22nd, 1951. My name is Jeff Waldman, and I'm conducting this interview as a part of Christian White's Eagle Scout Project, Voices of VOLMTV Veterans. Mr. Davidson served in the United States Army during the Vietnam War. His rank was an E5 Sergeant Non-Commissioned Officer. He served in Vietnam. Where were you living at the time?
I grew up in Warminster, Pennsylvania, Bucks County.
What was life like before your military experience?
Well, it was certainly quite a bit different from the way things are today. As hard as this might be to imagine, on my elementary school playground, we had a Navy jet. Our school was very close to the Johnsville Naval Air Station. They donated a jet, and the kids could climb on it, climb in the exhaust pipe, up on the wings, get in the cockpit. Lasted for a while until a few kids broke collarbones, wrists, that sort of thing. But back in those days, nobody sued. If you broke a bone, you went home, you got a smack in the head for being a dumb kid. So it was a little bit of a different world back then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why did you join?
I joined, I was basically undecided as to what I wanted to do with my future, and it was an option that was available to me, so I joined the United States Army at 17.
Okay. Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
I had a couple friends that went in the Army. My father served in the Coast Guard, and he was the only one. My uncle was in the Merchant Marines.
Mm-hmm. What was your family's reactions to your enlistment?
I think they were kind of glad to get rid of me, to tell you the truth. It was, yeah, it was, that's just the way it was. Every family's a little bit different, but by that time, like I said, I started working when I was 13 years old, 11 years old, so by the time 17 came around, I was not necessarily the most easily to be managed, I guess it was, so...
What were your expectations about the military service?
At that time, like most everyone else, I had very little idea of what I was getting into. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I adapted well. I came under good mentoring. I had good first sergeants, good company commanders. I didn't really have a problem with the orders or the drill or anything like that. Some people had a very hard time adjusting.
Okay. Do you recall your first days in the service?
Sure do. Yeah, I mean, there are things that you just don't forget. Yeah, I reported to North Broad Street in Philadelphia. I think it was 201 North Broad, if I remember correct. Then got on train and went to Fayetteville, North Carolina, South Carolina, Fort Bragg.
Tell me about your boot camp / training experience or experiences.
For some, and I don't know what it is like now, they would view it as being very dehumanizing, which I think it needs to be. You're all thrown into a barracks, everybody has to behave the same. Showers, latrines are all completely open. So there's no privacy or anything like that, which is, like I said, that's just the way it was. So it was a lot of physical training. Because I was the youngest in my basic training company, I was ordered to do everything first. So the example was, if he can do it, you can do it. So kind of thing. That was the mentality.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember your instructors for boot camp?
Yes, I do. I'm a little hard pressed to remember the names, but I was very impressed with. We had a first sergeant, E7, and boy, if E8. His objective was to be the youngest master sergeant in the Army, and I believe that he was going to achieve that. I believe he did that. Mm-hmm. But very straight, very orderly, but very fair. Mm-hmm. Very fair man. Yep.
Okay. Did you have any source of motivation to help get you through boot camp?
One another, the people you go through with. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that you know that it's 8 weeks. unless you really screw up and you get recycled back again, which very, very rarely happens. So you know it's only 8 weeks, and you're constantly busy all the time. So it goes by quick.
Did you know anything about Vietnam before you were sent there?
I had a couple friends that went, and then I had done 9 months in Germany before I went to Vietnam.
Where exactly did you go?
I landed in Cam Bay and was pretty much immediately transferred up to Pleiku, which was the northwestern province and a two-corps province of South Vietnam, and then sent out to a place called LZ Wake Davis.
Do you remember arriving there, and what was it like?
Yeah, I remember arriving there quite well. It's quite vivid in your mind, in my mind anyway, or anybody that goes through an experience like that. There's really nothing that compares to it at all, and the same is true for veterans today. There's nothing in this world that's even close to it. So we commonly refer to it when I go back to the world, like, Vietnam wasn't on the planet, was sort of the misconception of it. But basically it was a landing zone, all in a lot of dirt, a lot of brown earth, all blown out, bunkers and tents is what we lived in. All the perimeter was set up with the cross-firing fire positions, defensive positions. There was a front and a rear gate. There was a water point. Most LZ's landing zones were built near a water point so you could pump water up. Dusty, dirty, and hot.
Okay, what was your job/assignment when you arrived?
When I first arrived on LZ Lonely, they had an asphalt plant there. And whether this was for purposes of getting acclimated to the climate, I don't know. It's kind of brutal work. They had what we called a petaprime platform. And the petaprime was the liquid agent that fed into the asphalt plant. The petaprime drums weighed 500 pounds. And they sat on a platform on the full sun, hot, so they heated up and they were liquid. And the job was you punch a hole in it, 2 holes in it, you push it over and it goes down a pipeline to the plant. Again, dirty and hot, but it gets you some sense of what it's like to work in the heat and kind of get adjusted to that environment. So I probably did that. I didn't do it too long. They didn't keep us out there too long because I was a demolition specialist. So then I was quickly moved from that.
Okay. Did you see combat there?
Yes, I did.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Not in my unit. There were 2, 3 people that died from non-combat related incidents. Later, during the siege of Funan, which was in April of 1971, I didn't know the people. I didn't know them real well except to see them, but on LZ Lonely, which was in the same area, there were 2 people from the 1st of the 92nd Artillery that were killed. There were 14 wounded during that when the LZ was overrun and 2 artillery pieces destroyed. ARVN casualties, that was the South Vietnamese Army that worked with us, were significantly higher.
Okay, what was the wildlife like out there?
You mean like wildlife like?
Yeah, like animals.
The only experience that I ever had with wildlife, and this was the advantage of having a good dog. I don't know whose dog this was that was on guard duty with that night, but it was somebody's dog. And the dog didn't make a noise, but you just heard this little noise coming at him, very, very quiet. I mean, it's dark. You're sitting up there. 2 people on a position, guarding out over the perimeter, and son of a gun, if a trip flare didn't go off, and that brought some other people up, It was a big freaking lizard. I don't know what it was. It looked like a little dinosaur. It was a big lizard that set it off, you know. I didn't think to shoot it because you didn't want to give away your position. I guess I would have had a trophy had I shot it, but then you would have had to go out between the claymores to try to bring it back, and that wasn't a smart thing to do. No. So it set it off, and a couple people came up and asked, because people immediately wake up when something like that happens at night, so they climb out of the bunker and come up and, what was it? And it was a lizard. Lizard? It was a lizard. It was a big lizard. Other than that, water buffalo were common. And of course, they were a domestic animal. They weren't wild. I don't really recall anything. I saw an elephant lumbering, doing lumbering. Came upon that, but that was about it. I did see a dead tiger on an Arvin Jeep. They had apparently got one, and this thing stretched all over the hood of the Jeep. I mean, its paws were like literally dragging on the ground on both sides.
Did you have any encounters with booby traps while you were there?
Yes. For a long period of time, I was assigned to mine sweeps, and we did the mine sweeps between the checkpoints. It was the only type of mines that I ever encountered in that area. There were a Russian type of mine. It pretty much had a compression cap on it. So pretty much you had to drive over that, or somebody had to walk over that in order to compress that and set off the detonation charge. It did happen, but not rarely. If you were lucky, you found them. If you didn't, then a truck found them or somebody else found them. Yeah.
Did you see any of the tunnels that were used by the Viet Cong?
I did not see any tunnels.
Did you encounter any local people?
On a regular basis.
What were they like?
It was kind of a thing. It was kind of hard to know exactly who you were dealing with. Many of them were friendly. Many of them helped our armed forces, and unfortunately, there's a terrible, terrible history how we left many of them behind, and the aftermath is a nightmare. But the key thing in working with the civilians in my job was to work from checkpoint to checkpoint. Worked on an armored personnel carrier and a gun truck. So it was our job to go out first thing in the morning, make the mine sweep, clear the road between one checkpoint to another. When you got to the next checkpoint, which was an Arvin checkpoint, they had Arvin roadblocks there, there would be backups of civilian traffic. There would be civilians there. So that's when you would encounter them. The thing that I was trained and looked at, when somebody, to see an NBA or a VC and distinguish them and they're in the dress with the common people, it's pretty reliable. People who live outdoors for a long time look different. Their skin is weathered. They've got a weathered, more aged look to them. The other thing is that oftentimes those people were not carrying anything. It wasn't like they were going to the market or going here or going there. They were just kind of in there. And then you really could not effectively question them if you didn't have an interpreter. And then if you did have an interpreter or somebody that could question them, you mostly got a lot of silly nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, I don't understand, no understand, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Did you find any farmers that were Viet Cong?
I did not, no.
Were you ever ambushed?
Yes. Yes, that was common. Not heavy engagements, because at that time the NBA and the VC operating were pretty smart about what they were doing, and they realized the firepower that they were up against. When you're on part of an APC team or a gun truck team, you can carry everything. It's not on your back. So on a gun truck, you usually have two 50 caliber machine guns, two 60 caliber machine guns, at least one M79 grenade launcher, and then any other assortment of weapons that you just happen to have been assigned to you or you carry, you pick up. And so in the activity, it just plain wasn't worth them, but there were ambushes and traps that were set up, and it was animal or people are just like animals. They have habits. So if you maintain the same habits in a hostile environment, somebody's going to see that and they're going to pick a point where they're going to get you. Somebody's going to stand up to piss at the wrong time and they get shot.
Tell me about some of your other memorable experiences.
Somebody told me something once, and it was it proved to be true. It was after the siege of Funan lasted 6 weeks, and it was kind of a mess. It was pretty rough on some people. I didn't have too much of a heart at the time of it, but some people did, and it was really. So I remember after a mortar attack, and we're cleaning up, and somebody said, I forget what the question was that I asked, but somebody said to me, he says, "You're never going to understand what you're going through until you go home and read about it." And that was really true, because in the immediacy of the business and survival and just existing and trying to take care of yourself in a very hostile environment, you don't think too much about anything other than that. So I remember that, and unfortunately other instances about people getting hurt real bad, and it's
How did you stay in touch with your family while you were there?
letters. Yeah, letters was the only option that we had. There were some people that got to a shortwave radio telephone, but that was kind of few and far between. I guess I probably could have done it if I made the effort, but
Yeah. Okay. What was the food like there?
yeah. Fun. Yeah, it was fun. By the time I came back, I was pretty skinny, real skinny. And it was mostly from being so active, being in the heat, and eating and not eating. During the siege of Funan, our supplies were cut off, and we were strictly on sea rations for a long period of time. And they were World War II sea rations, so they were interesting. And we'd save them up and sometimes give them to the villagers and the civilians, or trade them for this, that, or the other. And if you could get to a village, we could buy watermelons, little round watermelons that were good, and bananas were common. And there was a few other things that I ate that I don't necessarily know what they were, but I didn't die from it.
Yeah. Did you have like a lot of supplies there?
We had what we needed, but sometimes no. Uniforms were sometimes in short supply, and I remember one incident where uniforms came in, and I think my name was Smith, but it didn't have my name on it. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. They were just uniforms. So you got new uniforms, but weren't really new, but better than what you had.
So did you feel any pressure or stress while you were there?
No, I think I very quickly got numb, which was a problem.
Was there something special you did for good luck?
Well, I did have a Catholic medal that I wore time when I was over there, and I also had, and I still have it. It's a mountain yard bracelet. It's a little piece of rounded brass, has some like chevron things cut in it.
How did people entertain themselves while they were there?
Sometimes we got movies would come. Sometimes entertainment, different acts came. I did not see Bob Hope or any big names. They were just smaller name venues that they brought around. And we played cards, or, basically there wasn't a whole lot of downtime in that regard. I mean, and when you were down, you were getting a shower, you were sleeping, you were eating, and getting ready to do what was ever next.
What did you do when you were on leave?
I had no leave.
You had no.
I had no leave. I did 15 months of continuous field duty in Vietnam, and I was discharged. I had no leave or R&R.
Where did you travel while in the service?
Vietnam, primarily around the Tu Quoc province.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to going to Vietnam, I spent 9 months in Germany.
What was that for?
Training, advanced training, and that's just where I got assigned. It was pretty good duty, and I was treated very well there, and I came under very good leadership, and I had good people around me because I made E5 in 13 months time in the service, which is pretty unusual. It was unusual back then. I mean, it happened. There were people that did it, and it's very rare now, just because of the way things are. You know, but it was lucky I came under good teaching, and I went to a few schools over there. And while I was on we did war game operations where they would get you up in the middle of the night, and you had to go out and set up like the Russians were coming or something. And there were different elaborations upon that, some more complex than others. Mm-hmm. I was on a war game operation when my orders came to go to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall any particularly unusual events while you were in service?
There's a whole lot of unusual events because nothing compares to it. There's at that time, there's different arguments about but people were drafted. Mm-hmm. So you got all kind of people that came, and you're just lumped together. People came for different reasons. So yeah, there was some pretty extraordinary circumstances on one training exercise when I was in Germany. Infantry training exercise, basically A, B team, advance, up the hill, and you take the objective. Somehow or another, I don't know how it happened, somebody got a live grenade, or more than one live grenade. And it was myself and a first sergeant, and I think at that time I was an E4. I was not an E5 at that time. So we're moving up, and then all of a sudden an explosion went off, and it wasn't a simulated explosion, and everybody stopped. And I don't think the lieutenant really knew what to do. So we formed everybody up in a line, and I said at the time, and I think this might have helped me get one of my promotions, but I said, the lieutenant and the sergeant and I are going to turn our back, and we want every grenade put on the ground, and then everybody step back. So we couldn't see who was doing anything. They did it, so we picked up the grenades and got the real ones separated. And I think there was 3 in there, and I don't know if it was but somebody, I don't know how it happened, but it doesn't matter.
What were some of the pranks that you or others would pull?
I didn't pull pranks. No. No, and especially in Nam, you don't pull pranks. No. I didn't. Maybe somebody did, but no.
What did you think of officers or fellow soldiers while you were in service?
You had good, you had bad. There's no question about that. Most people relate to somebody, and there's enough of relationships to make things work. I always have tried to get along with everybody. And that's part of the reason why we have the success at this post that we have, which is totally off the records, off the charts. But yeah, you can find somebody to get along with. And orders are orders. Who's ever in charge is in charge. Yeah. That's pretty clear. Right.
Did you keep a personal diary or any documentation?
No, I did not.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
I certainly do. Yes. December 24th, 1971.
Do you recall where you were?
Yeah, I recall everything. Yeah, from the time I left the LZ back to Cameron Bay, and then back. We probably stopped at Japan, Alaska, I'm not sure, but back to SeaTac International Airport in the state of Washington, and Fort Lewis, Washington, same place I left from.
How were you treated when you came back?
Not good. They're not good at all. But that was then. There was just, I was really unhappy with my separation at Fort Lewis, Washington. Everybody was just kind of ambivalent, and it was just like it wasn't good. It wasn't nice. And then even coming home, and for a great many years, it was not good at all. And to give you the history of it, there's an Air Force veteran that I know, Russell Gaskins, career Vietnam veteran, career Air Force guy, and he states that during his active duty, nobody wore their uniforms until Ronald Reagan came into office. And he said, you represent this country, you're going to wear your uniform. But that's how long that it lasted, and that negativity lasted about American troops and forces. Yeah, everybody was pretty much bad labels. I mean, and there was some justification for it, but it was really out of hand.
How did you feel about other veterans?
Fine. And sometimes that's obviously who I get along with best. Yeah.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterwards of your return home?
I came home, that was Christmas of 1971. Stayed at my grandparents' house for a while. And they were great. They were fantastic. And I did go to work. Had a job, got a job pretty much right away, and went to work. And then getting restless and unsettled and what have you, I bought a car, and I loaded what I had in the car, and I went traveling. And I spent about 2.5 years living in Utah, California, and Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Did you work or go back to school?
Not right away. I lived on my war money for a while because, at that time, and it still is today, I mean, it was enough to live on. And I didn't have rent or anything like that. But then I did go to work. I walked into the VA hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah, and got a job, which was pretty convenient, and that worked out, and I stayed there for a while. And then I did, after I pretty much settled down a little bit, calmed down a little bit, then I did come back to Pennsylvania and started to go back to college and work and got married. And,
Did you make any close friendships while in the service?
Yeah, well, yes and no. Everything's, you didn't really want to try to get to know people. Because of my time, and I did have very close friends, and unfortunately not good things happened to them. But that's just the way it goes. But in my 15 months of duty, I served in 5 different units, which meant about every 2.5 months I was changing companies, moving around. Part of that had to do with my MOS, and I think part of it had to do with everything that was going on at the time. I don't know that I was really all that unique.
Did you continue any of those relationships after the war?
I did see one guy, which was one of the reasons that I went to Salt Lake City.
For how long did that last? Just that one meeting?
No, I saw him. I was there. I lived out there for a while, and as I said, I worked at the VA hospital. So we probably got together about 4 or 5 times, I guess. But he was really a lost cause. So it was kind of tough.
Did you approve of Nixon's decision of Vietnamization?
In retrospect, no, and at the time, no. But it's history. It's what happened. Everybody wanted to get out. Nobody wants anybody to go to war. Everybody wanted to get out of Vietnam. Period. I mean, that was the whole thing. But the problem is the way that we left and what happened to the people after we left. And people don't know all those stories. But I can tell you one. We at our essay contest dinner, we have the high school kids, junior high, that come out. They do the Patriots Pen Voice of Democracy contest. We get 3 winners in each group, and then those winners advance. but we take the winners and their families down to the Continental Tavern. And we have a dinner, and we bring out Steve Sanacero comes, the mayor comes out, we give them certificates, we give them their awards, the press comes out, make it a big thing for the students and the families. So lo and behold, about 3 years ago, second place winner in the Patriots pen contest, last name was Lee. And I get to meet Mrs. Lee and Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee and Mrs. Lee were Vietnamese boat refugee people. Mrs. Lee was very young, and she tells this story, but hopefully this is the impact of the aftermath that we left behind, and to understand how it affected people's lives. Mrs. Lee says that her grandmother told her this story every day of her life, told her every day. She was in the market with her grandmother in South Vietnam after the American forces had left. The communist forces are in charge, and the things educators were executed, millions of people were forced into slave labor camps, families were separated, it was a bad time. She's in the market with her grandmother, and someone came up to her because her grandfather had been an educator and knew somebody, came up to her and said, "Get on the boat." That's when they left Vietnam. They walked from the market to the boat. They didn't go home and say goodbye. They didn't take anything with them. Nothing. That was the choice. You had to go when the boat was there. They got on the boat. So you heard about the boat refugees. And I verified this with other people, this story. They got on a boat and they left. At that time, the United States Navy was out in the territorial waters, which I don't know if I have no idea what the mileage is out. But a United States vessel is American territory, and in order for a refugee to have be accepted on U.S. territory, they have to get there by their own power. So the United States Navy couldn't go out and pull these boats in, or they weren't supposed to, at any rate. So as Mrs. Lee told me the story, the boat is loaded. I mean, this is like standing room only, right? They go out, X amount, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes out, and the engine dies. And they're drifting. And they drifted for 20 days on that boat. And during that time, you realize that everything happens. You know, people died, people gave birth, people went crazy, people attacked, maybe even killed one another. I mean, this is like really extreme human conditions, and they were subject to it. Lo and behold, they finally drift close enough to a United States Navy vessel. And as she told the story, they got near the vessel, they threw the rope ladders down, the big webbing, for them to climb up and get on the vessel. A couple people tried to climb up and they couldn't do it. They fell back in the water, they fell back onto the boat, they had no strength. They were just barely alive. And she says at that point, the sailors climbed down the ropes and started carrying people up. But if you can imagine that aftermath, and that, did we want to leave or didn't we want to leave? Who would want to leave anybody in those circumstances? That's why we're so blessed to live in America and have the country that we have. And we have, you know, veterans and a government that will do things even though we're not always happy with what they do. But if you just can't imagine what it's like to be in those type of conditions. Mm-hmm. I was involved with moving refugees during the siege of Funan. Not many. We went out on a convoy and picked some people up and relocate them. But even that experience, it was god awful. I mean, you're taking people out of their homes and you're taking them somewhere they don't want to go. It's and again, everything happens in that circumstance. You know, like I said about people dying, people going crazy, and
When the drafter was pardoned by Carter, how did you feel?
I guess, you know, I got enough anger issues not to worry about that. I got enough things that I'm angry about. That's, you know, so it's just what it was. It's hard from some perspectives, and maybe yours, to realize what the public sentiment was and how many people were so much against the war, vehemently against the wars, that they left the country. You know, and so there's all kind of people you can judge. They judge Muhammad Ali, you know, George Bush, Bill. I mean, it's what it was. It's just what it was.
Did you join any veteran organizations?
Yes, the VFW and the American Legion and the DAV.
What did you go on to do as a career after the war?
I worked primarily all in the steel industry. I worked for United States Steel, Lonergan Steel, Jurgensen Steel, and Castle Metals. Worked everything from the open hearth up to the sales desk.
Did your military experiences influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yeah, of course it influenced me. Right. You know, the more callous side of me says my favorite bumper sticker is "Kill 'em all, let God sort 'em out." The people, we talk a lot about, you know, lives being special. To me, in one sense, life is very cheap because it's totally disrespected.
What kinds of activities does your post or association have?
This post, Yardley VFW Post 6393, for the 2014-2015 year, was named by VFW National as an All-American Post. Do the numbers. Of all the posts from Europe across the Americas and into Asia, there was 159 posts that earned All-American status. That's the top 2%. That's rare. On November 10th, 2015, I stood beneath the Capitol Dome in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and myself in this post was recognized by Steve Sanacero, Representative Steve Sanacero, in House Bill 536. So we do a lot. Our community service report is like 14 pages long. Our mission is to honor the dead by serving the living. The way we actualize that vision is through each veteran's talents, interest, resources, and networks. If somebody can do something and they want to do it, they're under the umbrella of the VFW, we support it and we try to get them out because that's the best way to be effective. You know, we can't cure cancer, but you know, we can help people in the community, which we do, and it doesn't have, they don't have to be veterans. Basically anybody that comes in the door that we can help. We have a very successful network of people that help. To give you another case in point, I got a request for funding for a veteran from a very unusual location, and I don't want to mention it, but this, within, I think it was 10 hours, I got $250. The check's out to the guy, who he's involved in our network, and everything is vetted, everything's fine, and I can probably get more if he needs it. That's the last message that I gave him, and the message came to me secondhand. He knows me, but he spoke to somebody else, and they spoke to me, and yeah. So we do, like I said, it's possible. That's the frustration thing that I have to say about anger and about our government in Washington and people's priorities today, that they just don't freaking get it. But America is strong. America does wonderful, fantastic things, and it can and it does work. You just have to give people the means by which to do it.
Do you attend any veteran reunions?
No. Conventions and stuff, but no, yeah.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Still affects my life. Huge. Yeah, probably every aspect of my life, but I don't regret a thing. I am very, very grateful, and to be perfectly blunt about it, I'm 64. I'm like at the end of my life. You know, this is, I don't know how many years I have that are going on. I'm perfectly happy working in this organization and doing what I can. I'm glad I have the opportunity to do it.
How do you feel about your service?
I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what everybody I served with did, and it's given me a greater recognition and being proud of multiple avenues of service. The thing that was drilled into me, and I understood this, and it's become more relevant in today's world, but back in my 11 Bravo training, infantry training, I remember being told that at that time it took like 10 support people to put one infantryman in the field. Well, when you think about that, somebody's got to procure the ammunition, somebody's got to procure the packs, they got to procure, endless amounts of things that allow this one little thing to happen. And that's given me a greater appreciation for what we can all do together.
Do you feel this generation has the same sense of duty to their country as you did?
Some do, some don't. Millennials don't get it. That's the 18 to the 34-year-old age group, okay? There's a real problem. The real problem is documented by a report that was in the Wall Street Journal about 2 weeks ago. Since the Census Bureau started measuring this number back in the late 1800s, we now have the largest group of 18-year-olds to 34-year-olds living in the paternal home than any other time in history. The whole economics in America has changed. The whole structure of the single-family home and the single family has changed. You think I'm kidding? The news is in the back pages of the local Bucks Advance. You look at that paper every week, there will be 8 or more pages of sheriff sales in there. 8 or more. And when you see that the sheriff sales are happening, that the millennials, the people in these age groups, cannot afford to get the first home, cannot afford to live out on their own, what do you think is going to happen? I think it's pretty predictable what's going to happen is that we're all going to have to live together and like it. Yeah. And I don't have a problem with that. If people, and that's a key thing that, and I guess it taught me this in the service, and the other thing that, first you decide how you're going to live and who you're going to spend your time with. After that, that's it. Nobody, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, or anything. But you make a commitment. You're going to be with people. You're going to do this. You're going to do this mission. You're going to do this life, whatever it is. Do it and wait. And if you do it well, I know I sound hard and I sound harsh, but I'll tell you, I firmly believe miracles happen all the time. They're happening around us all the time, and nobody's paying attention. And they're not. And because they're not paying attention, now we all got to live together. Yeah. It's all changed. Everything has changed.
So, what are your thoughts on the wars in the past decade that we've had?
Well, there's a whole lot of political debate about what was necessary, what we should have done, what we need to do. Because you conquer people, it doesn't mean they'll be democratic. The Mideast is a big problem, and it'll probably take us 200 or more years to figure it out. If you just look back, who was the guy that recently published a George Washington history, 1776, and it's like 200 years after the Revolution, and they're writing the history still today and rewriting the history today. So we're not going to figure this out in our lifetime. There's no question about that. Should we have done it? It's a mess. It's a real mess. I have faith in two people. Buckminster Fuller was the futurist who gave us the geodesic dome, and he foresaw the age of information coming, and he said in the future we'll all like one another a lot more. But he didn't say it was going to be easy getting there. It wouldn't be an easy job. And so then how do we view things? What somatics do we view to view this war effort and what's happening within on the global perspective, because we are really a global community. There's no escaping it anymore. And then what do we need to do? But is it a clash of civilizations, or is it an ongoing Eucharistic moment? Are we all really learning to love and appreciate one another a lot more? That's not going to be decided by me, but more by people in your generation.
How do you think the modern day soldier is different from soldier in the Vietnam War?
They're better equipped. They have better equipment. They're certainly way better respected and supported, through the whole process and the aftermath. But there are some things that don't change, and they don't change. And battlefield scenes don't change. When somebody is dejected, there was a photo in the journal of a bombing site in Iran, and the smoke's still rising and the debris all over, and there's one guy sitting on a bumper of a vehicle. I don't know who he is or what but he's obviously dejected. This guy's like, He's totally seen something that's, somebody's got to come along, pick that guy up and say, come on, let's go. We got to clean up. We got to do what we got to do. Come on. That, I don't care what type of equipment you have, that the emotions of that, the emotions of losing a comrade, of seeing somebody really wounded, or to me, the most frightening thing was having somebody missing. That was the worst, because you don't know, and you never know. But those things, those elements don't change. I don't care what type of equipment or what, that those human emotions are still the same.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Basically, I thank you guys for what you're doing, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because when those of us that are older see younger people doing the right thing, it gives us faith that, hey, somebody's going to carry the ball, somebody's going to do it, and there is enough good things and enough good elements. So just don't ever lose faith, don't ever lose determination, because no matter how bad things get, there's always a tomorrow.